That's it?
Yes.
Do you know
best
our
friend.
friends in Adelaide?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll just pop down and find out.
Sure, we must. Yeah. So how long have you been here, Steve?
Oh, just coming up to 3 years now, which is why my accent is completely Australian.
Oh, I
Pretty
gathered.
good, I
Yeah,
have to say.
Absolutely, I'm pretty much native now.
Had me fooled.
Yes.
That's not hard. So have you always been a stand-up comedian, or have you had
No,
other...
no. I mean, that doesn't make me any money at all. If I was doing that, then I'd be outside in the street begging for change. But no, I also work in IT. I do music journalism. I do pretty much anything that I can think of. I try new things all the time. So I've just taken up Taekwondo, even though I'm very unnaturally suited to it physically.
Yeah.
But, you know, you got to try new things.
Yeah.
And,
Does Taekwondo pay well? Or?
No. I mean, it pays in reverse, in fact.
Not as well as Quando.
No, I haven't tried that one. So
Could
good
be a
they named it
lounge
5
act.
times.
That'd be good, yeah. Become a lounge act. There you go. Sue-Belinda, you're well?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm so fit, I'm dangerous.
All right.
Yep.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And Kathy, you're well?
Very well, thank you, Trevor. It's been a
Okay.
long day, but a bit wearier now.
Oh, yeah. The cup of soup wasn't enough to keep you going. Just bumped into you in the hall. So,
Was cooking dinner.
Oh,
with a
yay.
teaspoon.
It's a bit sad, isn't it?
Yeah. the
So
life.
that's not what they used to talk about on Kelly's show with meal in a mug.
No, not quite.
No. Well, look, I've got a virtual feast for you to tuck into tonight. I'm not sure if it'll, placate your hunger pains, but let's see if it can at least, fill you with some sort of satisfaction. Our first entree, well, it's all about this.
Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention.
Oh, I don't know about you, but I just want to play Sinatra now. Do we have to talk? Can I just play some Frank? I love Frank. This is the story is in relation to a survey by 2 American professors who looked at our most common regrets: romance, lost love, and family were at the top. Is that really a surprise? It's not about whether we made enough money or had enough career changes, that sort of thing.
That's not a surprise.
No, it's not a surprise, but I think it's such an interesting planet. I want to see all of it.
Yes.
And that's expensive, so there's going to be parts I'm going to have to miss out on.
That's true.
I'm with you.
And I'm just going to be a bit ticked about missing out on those.
I think the older you get, the more you realise how little of it you're really going to probably get to see.
That's
in the
right.
end.
That's right.
Yeah.
Unless I win Gold Lotto, and I'll employ an army of little men to carry me around the odd places like.
Oh, can
up
I
the
be?
Inca-
Can I be one of those little men? Because then I'll get to see everything too. That'd
Lovely.
be great.
I feel that's not the most practical way to get around. But
No. But the Inca Trail, for example, I'd like to
Yeah.
walk that, but I've looked at it, and walking at my age and in my physical condition,
Okay.
I'm not exactly sleek and shiny anymore.
So these men have to be little and they have to be men.
No. I'll settle for some
All
sturdy,
pertinent
strong women. I don't.
Absolutely, yeah.
I
You
don't
get into
really
the big
mind,
issues.
actually.
We many years ago, my family, my children and I climbed Huashan, which is the most precipitous mountain in China. It's extraordinary, and you climb all day. Do you ever see the Karate Kid movie?
Yes.
With the huge staircase.
Yes.
That
Oh, yeah.
mountain.
Oh, right.
That's at it's not at the start, but it's in the bottom half of the mountain. It just keeps going, and we. Oh gosh, I'm saying completely lost my train of
Climbing the
thought.
mountain with the
Trying to
kids.
Climbing the
Yeah.
mountain with the kids. I just think those things are extraordinary experiences, and that's that's the stuff that stays with you. Really,
I think it is too.
so different and such an unusual thing to do. I often think maybe that's what I would have liked to do if I had sort of sat around and really thought about, gee, what did I miss out on doing? Might have been just to do lots of travelling, but then you would have missed all that amazing family time.
That's true.
Yeah.
See, when you mention travelling, though, I always find there's like this fallacy of like you have to see the big things. You have to go to the relative wonders of the world, or the places which essentially are the ones which you can take your selfie at and say, oh, look how many likes I got. That's amazing.
Here I am in front of the Taj Mahal, and
Precisely.
Yeah.
But so often it's kind of these things. It's like there's something very nearby that's a lot quieter, that's very similar, that's actually just the kind of more reminiscent of the original reason why someone actually wanted to see it in the first place, rather than spending your entire time going, there's a lot of people here. Ooh, don't like
Full
this.
of tourists. Can you believe that?
They charged me $10 for a coffee. God, it's an instant as well.
Well, we did the Sacred Way in China, which was beautiful.
What's
And
the
no one-
sacred way?
The sacred way is this long passageway where you pass. It was designed for the Ming dynasty, and you pass past all of these statues of the most wonderful things that aren't in China, like elephants and tigers and camels and things, but they were brought to the court so that people could enjoy them and see them for the first time. And it's just serene. There's no one there. You know, we were there with we had children, so you can't go on a tour. We had to get a person to come with us in case we did something unspeakable.
With your children.
I
Yes.
know. So
Who would have thought?
there was a guide, the four of us, and the largest willy wagtails I've ever seen in my life.
Real ones.
Yeah, real Chinese willy wagtails.
Sorry, what is that woolly wag
It's
tail?
a bird
It's a bird.
that wags its tail.
It's not one of the little men.
No, it's not one of the little men.
Covered in baby oil. Oh, no, we're going
No,
too
you're
far.
going
Sorry.
far too far now.
And it's like the seagulls in San Francisco. They come up to your knees. They're huge.
They do.
Or pelicans in the Caribbean. They're grey and small.
Bit
That's
of
what
an
the
anticlimax.
explorers were
aren't
thinking
they?
when they came to Australia and they saw all those bizarre animals.
That's it. See,
Probably
that's
why
it.
we call our prawns prawns and not shrimps, because they're not shrimps.
That's
they're quite
right.
large.
See, that's how the dodo wandered off. Because the dodo are very tall, they can't fly, so they were a metre high, and they were naturally curious. So they'd just walk up and stand there and look at you while you loaded your gun and went, boom, here's dinner.
So the expression should really be curiosity killed the dodo.
Dodo. That's right. That's right. That's why you're as dumb as a dodo.
All right. So we're pretty much in agreement. Travel. Yeah, that's the. If there's going to be any regret to play to what we haven't done when we get to the about to take our last breath, that's going to be it.
Sort of, except the thing that whenever I do actually think, oh, there's something I regret, it's always that I didn't spend more. I wasn't there for things with my kids. I was working or, not for everything, but I still managed. Mother's guilt's never done. I still managed to find things I really wish I'd been at.
Dads have guilt about that thing too. Those sort of things too.
But what a great study, don't you
Oh,
reckon?
yeah.
It was, how clever to do that study.
Have any
Yeah.
of you any sort of things about, gee, I wish I'd done such and such? Because inside me lurks the spirit of an archaeologist.
Right.
That must be
I would've-
uncomfortable.
Yeah. Coexisting.
He's trying to dig his way out.
That's
Yeah.
her way. Her
Sorry.
way. But I always wish I'd done something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's the romance of the whole thing. But I just love the idea of, I don't have to do it in Egypt. That's hot. I don't do hot. But the old time team that used to be on the BBC, I love
I know,
that
it sounds
show.
fascinating. I filmed with archaeologists once at Redland, where
Oh, yeah.
the first Brisbane was actually at Redland, and we were there for a dig, and the idea was 7:30, and we were hoping for the big discovery. And it was like watching the grass
Watching paint dry.
Oh, look, we've got bottles.
It's a very meticulous, slow.
You got a lot of patience. Yeah. Might be killing that
And we
romantic
didn't get the big
notion
reveal.
right there, Sue-Belinda.
No, I was
To
after
find a way
Roman
to make it
Hordes.
interesting.
Not early Queensland bottles.
What about you, Steve? Do you reckon you'll have any regrets?
Oh, absolutely. Most of my regrets are from my school days when I think about things like being about 8 years old and wetting myself. And rather than actually kind of like addressing this quietly and kind of like actually finding a subtle way to deal with it,
Sure.
I remember putting my
share it with the
hands...
radio audience tonight.
Well,
Right across Queensland. Wonderful.
you're asking about regrets, and I'm hearing all these kind of like highbrow things. I'm thinking that's not my level of regrets. There, I'm here. I'm living in Australia. Hooray! This is not even where I'm from. But I think about it's a strong memory I have of being a child and putting my hand up and saying, "Miss, I've wet myself," and it became a. It was associated with me for years to come, as you can imagine. And I just look back and I think there were so many other ways I could have dealt with that, more subtle ways. Maybe at the end of the class, just kind of like going, oh, by the way, I'm going to need a new pair of trousers.
By the way, notice
Hindsight's a
anything
wonderful
different?
thing.
And it's damp over there in the second back row.
But I bet you learned a lot. You've never done it again,
Oh,
right?
I got a thick skin. Yeah.
Right. Let's move right along to our second entree for Eat the Week. According to director James Cameron, this is the man behind the first two Terminator films, the world he envisaged in this movie is coming to pass.
Listen to me very carefully.
Dyson listened while the Terminator laid it all down. Skynet, Judgment Day, the history of things to come. It's not every day that you find out you're responsible for 3 billion deaths. He took it pretty well.
Yeah. Nice little aside. He took it pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. So blasé.
Yeah. So the Terminator films, are you a fan?
No.
Yes.
No?
Love that movie.
Yeah. I reckon the first
Or
two
those
definitely.
movies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the first two.
Yeah,
Maybe the
just
first.
a little aside, and I was telling Tom Greeno, the producer of the show, this, that Carl Krushenitsky, very well-known scientist, particularly through the ABC circles, reckons they're the best films ever made.
Oh,
Scientist, yeah, right, big fan.
this is a great subject.
Okay, well,
Science fiction, full stop's a great subject.
Oh,
I just
yeah.
love it. I love
Yeah.
the fact that Steve Jobs made those.
no, he's real. He's not science fiction.
No, really? No. But
bit.
well, a little bit now.
Yes.
But when they were making discs,
Yes.
he wanted the discs to look just like the ones that Mr. Spock used in Star Trek.
Oh, right. Is that
So
right?
that's why they're all in the primary colours.
Is that so?
There's a whole study on this, and I actually sat, when you help kids do university assignments and learn all those things you never thought you'd need to know.
Yeah.
One of them was this whole study in does science fiction drive science or vice versa, and
Yes.
what's the relationship? And there's definitely with a relationship with what's imagined, and then scientists going, could probably make that happen.
Yeah,
You're-
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
American
I'm still
Army,
waiting for my jetpack. You know.
the
They're
American
around.
It's
You can get a
incredibly
jetpack.
inefficient.
You can buy jetpacks now.
Yeah.
You can buy them online.
Okay.
Yep.
eBay.
What about Dick Tracy? The Dick Tracy one?
Yeah.
Talking to watch. There you
Yeah.
go. Well, according to James Cameron, we live in a world of constant surveillance and smartphones that can be tapped by intelligence agencies and predator drones in the sky and serious discussions at high levels about the ethics of robotic combat that have autonomous kill capability. You're talking about Terminators and you're talking about Skynet. Very interesting. I remember a couple of years ago there was an interview with him, and he said that he only keeps a beat-up old phone. He won't have a smartphone because he said as soon as you do, you're basically plugged into what we called Skynet in those
Skynet.
films. They know where you are. You are plugged in.
Can I frighten you badly? iRoomba. You know those funny little...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
The
got one.
vacuum
I got
cleaners
a
that-
vacuum. I got one of those one this week, actually.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it.
Well,
It's
did you
amazing.
know they learn your house? And when they've learnt your house,
They kill you.
you
I
can...
knew it. I got to call my wife.
No, it's not just to put your cat on and take photos for YouTube or anything like that, but they actually learn your house and then they can upload data. So if they can
Oh, I see.
they can tell the company, look, I've learnt about this house, so when you're doing the next iteration of an iRoomba, perhaps you could do one that copes with larger spaces or
Yeah.
more varied floors or whatever.
I went to see 1984 at the theatre recently, and
Oh, this is
I'd
the quite
forgotten-
disturbing
Yes.
version. Were you?
Yeah, I was actually. I watched a lot of it. Like that was pretty intense. But
For the people at home, Kathy had her hands up over her face. Okay,
well, this is how I've watched most scary
you
movies.
can
in
see
my
this, by
life.
the way, on Facebook Live. So if you're watching on Facebook Live via the ABC Brisbane Facebook page, you could have seen that. Yes.
It was. I'd forgotten. I studied it in high school, and it's basically the premise was in my head. But there was a line in it, and actually I meant to grab it before I came in tonight and say what it was. But where they explain what happened and how things went this way, and one of the lines is that when communication could go both ways, then that's when things started to change. And I just thought, it's just so intense. But the other
We're
day,
there.
did you see the news this week that just within days of Tesla CEO Elon Musk saying artificial intelligence is the biggest risk?
Yes.
Facebook shut down one of its AI systems after their chatbots started creating their own language and speaking to each other.
It's
No
more
way.
efficient language.
Because
yeah,
Mark
that's
Zuckerberg
right.
was one of the ones who was arguing with Elon Musk about it, saying
Yep.
AI doesn't need to be regulated.
No, but it does.
Now Facebook's shut down one of
Within
its
days,
AI apps.
apparently.
Well,
within
there's always-
days.
there's always-
because
Whoa.
it created its own language.
Well, there's always been this kind of these warnings about AI that's kind of existed for decades. But obviously, until this point, we're starting to reach a precipice where it's actually becoming more realistic and something that maybe we need to make a tangible consideration of. And I know the language thing where they replaced numbers with I. So basically, almost like reverting to the Roman numerals to communicate. And but obviously the headline kind of just makes everyone go Skynet, because these are genuine concerns. But the funny thing is you get all this conversation that happens about kind of like the concerns of AI and the level that you're taking it and how much kind of like self-awareness there is. But, you know, how many of us here actually have a clue about the level of how it's currently being like monitored or currently being regulated?
I'm not even aware of my own life, really, let alone whatever anyone else is doing.
Those little things like all of those sites that use cookies, they're gathering little pieces of information about you and putting together a picture of you.
I mean, like, if at this point you're kind of like worried about data about yourself being kind of like picked up by, say, you know, your Facebook account, your email, your cookies, which are going to have your searching history and things like that, then you've missed the boat and you've got to get into that cave and just hide, because at this point it's like, you know, even to the extent of facial recognition in CCTV, things like that. This data is out there and it's going to be out there in some sort of level. I'm more about kind of like, hey, take it. Here's stuff that I'm doing. Here's my name. You know, I was definitely there. I've got all this data. I've got like Google knowing exact location. So when it's like, you know, someone who looks just like me, because I got a pretty generic face, commits all these murders and things like this, but I can say, hey, check it out. Look, I was definitely on the ABC radio filming this or recording this.
It's quite a
I
plan
didn't kill
you've
anyone.
cooked up.
It is. I'm
Right,
right about
yeah,
this.
okay.
Look, you guys are all my alibis, so you better remember this.
Did those lights just suddenly dim?
But, you know, all you've got to do
Sudden
is go
chill.
back to 1975. John Brunner, Shockwave Rider.
Yeah.
Right,
He talked about the giant internet
right.
back in 1975. He talked about hacking. He talked about identity theft. And we all read the book and went, oh, it'll never happen.
Or
and
we
it
probably
was-
just didn't understand it and just went, what? No.
Wouldn't that have been around
What
the
a-
time
what
of
a
the
clown.
Australia
What
card?
does he know?
When everybody said,
It's like kids'
That's right.
problem.
we're not having a card.
We're not having a card.
And then we've given all this other information away.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. All of that furor about the Australia card. Yeah.
Incredible.
We provide
Yeah,
more
now we
info-
just readily just hand stuff over
We
all
do.
the time.
I mean, somebody says, would you like to join our online community? And you merrily put in all of this information
Yeah.
going off to some faceless person.
It's interesting with young people, I think, too, for our generation and earlier generations, there was that protection of identity and you were very aware of that personal information. But I notice that my kids don't, that doesn't really resonate. I mean, they don't put their phone number on Facebook.
It's so weird as well, isn't it? Because it's a different way of thinking. It's almost like you're basically having a public persona and a private persona, which is something you associate with like famous people, politicians, things like that. They have to create that. But regular people now have to actually consider that in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, this is me and I am enjoying a fine coffee. There's not kind of like a photo of you on the sofa in your pants, eating a pizza, watching terrible films, and you're still in your pajamas because it's
Sometimes
6 p.m., you know?
Yeah.
Not of me.
Yeah, that's right. That's part of the mindset of the digital natives. That's what they've grown up with. So why should they worry about it? You know,
It's
this is
curious.
the world that we live in. This is it.
I still can't understand what makes people think that I could be vaguely interested in what they're eating or drinking.
It's a good point, actually. The food ones are the particularly baffling ones for
They are.
me. I have a good photo on my Instagram account, though, of a pile of toast that's been mashed into a pan of beans, which for many years was my only photo on Instagram, because I was like, well, you want your account full of photos of food? Here you go. Toast mashed into a pan of beans. Done. Filter. Like.
Right, now that we've come back to food, let's move on to our third entree, shall we? It was 20 years ago since this happened.
Welcome to this special National 9 News update, and the news out of Paris on the condition of Princess Diana is not good. She is now officially reported as dead. According to reports out of Paris, and we will bring you a briefing in just a moment, Princess Diana died around 4 a.m. French time, Paris time, about 1 hour ago.
I just say that Sue-Belinda Meehan finds Tracy Grimshaw's report rather humorous there.
I did. I'm so sorry.
Because
She
of the
said-
wording of it.
She
yes.
said her condition is not good. She's been pronounced dead. Well, that's about the not goodest you can possibly get, isn't it? That's just appalling.
Do you think perhaps this conversation should be around the standards of journalism? Have they improved, particularly on commercial television?
You know, with something like that they're going to play every 10 years from now
Right.
until eternity.
That's live breaking
Yes.
coverage,
Well,
though.
yeah.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Her condition is not good. She's been reported as dead.
She was
I'm-
probably,
Oh,
in
look,
her
I'm
head, she
so
was
sorry.
probably scrambling for the words as it
Yeah.
was coming through.
That is true.
Hoping not to offend and,
How am I going to say this?
find the right tone, and suddenly you find you've
That's the most fertile field for conspiracy theorists on the planet, wouldn't it be? It'd be right up there with the moon landing.
Moon landing, steel beams on the Twin Towers. Yeah, all sorts of...
Or Paul McCartney, you know.
Oh, yeah, fall. Yeah.
The maybe late Paul or...
Yes,
no?
that's right, yes. Yeah. So the reason that we've brought up Diana is that in a documentary screened in Britain this week, Princess Diana described how Prince Charles was all over her, in inverted commas, like a bad rash at the start of their courtship. Diana reveals that Charles' attempts to woo her during a barbecue in Sussex in 1979 when she was 18 were not very romantic. It's funny, isn't it? You would never pick Charles for not being particularly romantic, would you?
I thought he'd be pretty smooth.
When the couple were interviewed to mark their engagement, Diana was left dumbstruck by the prince's response to the question about whether they were in love. Diana replied, "Of course." Charles gave his famous response, "Whatever in love means."
That was very
or something
good.
like that.
Do you imagine, though? Imagine all of those kind of like micro actions of your life being kind of having so much attention drawn to them. I'm like, sometimes someone can ask me a question, I can be like, haha. And then I realise they've actually asked me a question because I completely misheard them. I'm like, what if I knew that 25 years later, people would be like, he laughed when I asked him what he thought about his grandmother dying. And I'd be like, oh, I didn't know that's what you were talking about. I had no idea. And in years to come, people would be like, oh, yeah, he laughed. You're the guy who laughed at your grandmother dying. And I'd be like, no, that's not what happened. I had
It's like
corn on the cob. And
that British radio station that phoned around and asked people if they could have anything in the world, what would they like for Christmas? And everyone had been saying an end to hunger, world peace.
Right.
And the Prime Minister at the time said, a nice warm pair of slippers.
It's pretty good, though, right?
Practical.
Poor man, no one had said to him, we're talking about nice warm pair of slippers.
He's got all the other stuff. World peace, you know. So, do you remember, is it that 20 years? Where were you when she died?
I was in the kitchen washing up.
Watching Tracy Grimshaw with that report.
I had the telly on in the corner.
Amused by what she said, perhaps.
No, actually, I don't. I honestly think that might be the first time I ever heard how badly it was constructed.
Okay. Kathy, you're a journalist. Where were you?
Actually, I was on a long haul. Well, I had just arrived back in Australia from a long haul flight, and walked in, and it had rolled out, and she had died, and it was just that surreal. I won't forget it, really. It was a really strange time. You know, when you're exhausted and jet lagged, and we just sat in front of the television and watched this. In those days, it was rolling coverage, surprisingly. But, I remember being, it was really surreal, and we just watched those images coming out and that, going over and over and little bits of details coming out. And I'd be interested to know if any of your listeners remember this, but sometime before that happened, like in the 12 months before that happened, you remember they used to do those articles once a year, and they'd get some psychics saying, what are the big things?
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
And I read an article, and this woman said, a young royal will die this year and it will change the face of the royals. And I don't remember it ever coming up afterwards, but I definitely read that.
Yeah, I read it too.
Oh, my gosh.
That's her. That's what's happened. It was also...
spooky.
There are a lot of people on this planet now saying a lot of things.
Well, that's true. The odds that somebody will get it right for all the ones that were completely wrong.
It's just another one of those futurists, just predicting doom and gloom
Probably
for
James
all of us.
Cameron.
But it was extraordinary because it was the first huge outpouring of public grief that I can remember.
Yeah, it was just amazing, wasn't it?
Oh, I remember John Lennon's death being particularly...
But there were mountains of flowers, Trevor.
Yes, yeah.
We had a friend, and he and his wife, we did have one. He and his wife were living in London, and they said when the wind blew the wrong way, because there were 15-foot high piles of flowers.
Yeah.
And he said the smell was just excruciating.
And it went on and on, didn't it? It just went on for days and days and days.
And they wouldn't let
and then
people
the
take them
funeral
away because they brought
Yeah.
in people to start removing them, and the crowd wouldn't let them.
Well, the Daily Express newspaper in the UK have never stopped reporting on it. It's,
there you go.
it's,
Neither
On
does
the
Women's
downside.
Weekly.
All right, yeah. But no, I was doing my paper round when I found out. In fact, I was I'd been like in my teens at the time, and I actually went up to deliver the paper to one of the houses as usual. I'm barely awake as I was at that time. And the door opened, which threw me because at that time I'm kind of like, human interaction? This is unfamiliar. And there was a very old lady who kind of said to me, it's like, oh, Diana died. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's nice.
Oh, no. You're just so inappropriate, aren't you?
I'm telling you, this is exactly how it happened. And at the time, I had no idea. I mean, I just knew that someone was opening the door and telling me Diana. It wasn't even kind of like, hello, how are you? By the way, I think you may like to know that one of the royal family members, a prominent one, in fact, who was in line for the throne, has died. It was just like, Diana died. Diana died.
And you only regret the fact that you wet your pants when you were 8.
She got her paper.
She could have been talking about Diana or anyone. Could have been her mum. If you don't know who Diana was.
Diana Ross, you know.
Gosh.
Well,
I'm sorry.
you're listening to Eat the Week, perhaps the inappropriate version on this particular program on ABC Radio Brisbane and Queensland. You can watch the segment, if you so choose, via Facebook Live. My guests are Sue-Belinda Meehan, teacher, Steve Morgan, comedian, and Kathy McLeish, ABC journalist. Let's move on to our three mains. Well, yes, cars that have been... We're just going to talk about cars, dud cars. We're talking about lemons here. If you don't know exactly what a lemon is, this might give you a visual idea.
I'm warning you, if you don't start, I'll count to 3. 1, 2, 3, right. That's it. You've tried it on just once too often. Right. Well, don't say I haven't warned you. I've laid it on the line to you time and time again. Right. Well, this is it. I'm going to give you a damn good thrashing.
You talk to your car like that when you're in frustration when it won't go for you, or
Doesn't everyone? I used to own a 64 Mini. You know, one of those wonderful things that if somebody left their sprinkler on,
yes,
it wouldn't go because you only had to have moisture
in the air, and that was it.
in the air, and it would just go.
It was cactus.
It
Yeah,
was.
sorry.
Had no synchro on first, so when you went up a big hill,
Oh yeah, crash that gearbox.
you had to push
Synchro
your
on
foot.
first?
This is
Synchronised gears.
Synchronised
He's too young
gear.
to know.
He's just a baby.
Yeah,
So
double
you
clutch.
had to
double declutch
So what I used
frightening.
to do, I used to
on a hill.
I used to accelerate with the right foot
Yeah.
while at the same time I was pushing the gear stick into first
Oh, you
with
rebel.
my left foot.
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what
And
you
if
had
the
to do.
car in front was washing the windscreen,
My
the
car might
moisture would
stop.
just make that cut out. So
That's
I think
right.
you know a lot about this. Have you had one of these?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Why would anyone own a car in this era? Get a horse.
No.
I'm not that old.
My first car was a Suzuki Ute, a little tiny thing, and I used to manage a big inner city service station car wash, like the big cars that the car wash on the old pulley all the way through, and a big car park. And the guys in the that worked there used to, for a joke, lift up my little car like a wheelbarrow and turn it around sideways in the car park.
They used to do that to me at Teachers College. They'd wheel it up like a wheelbarrow
they
and
were
put
tiny
it on,
things.
on the side of a cliff or something.
Well, this thing it had a motorbike engine, so once it got to 80, an alarm went off, and it used to shut up. It was always push it to the alarm, and I loved it. I loved that little car. I really loved it, but eventually it just got too hard. It didn't have reverse, and so I used to have to jump out and push it backwards, and then jump in and drive forward.
It's usually when you're a student, you're dirt poor. Going to my Year 12 farewell, one of my only mates that owned a car had a Morris 1100, and
Could love those.
and it used to jump out of gear all the time, right? So you imagine 5 big burly blokes jammed into a little Morrie. And where we had our formal dinner, the car park was on a hill, of course, right?
Oh.
And as we were trying to leave and going up the hill, the car would jump out of gear, and we'd all quickly have to jump out and push the car, get the car going again, jump back in. We go like a few more metres, and then the car would jump out of gear, and the doors would come open again, and the guys jumping out. We're all in,
like
suits
the
and ties.
Flintstones.
It's like that. And the irony was, my mate's dad was a mechanic, so
Yeah, of course.
so because he had the worst possible car that you could have had. But have you ever owned a lemon, Steve?
I've never owned a car.
Really?
wow.
got my license at 18 because I knew that would be a good idea. But until moving here, I lived in London, lived in Bath. The UK is pretty small. You can walk from one side to the other in a few hours.
That's my theory.
Relative to Australia, and public transport's so good. I mean, like if I owned a car in London, that's a statement of me saying that I'm some sort of millionaire, right? That's me
Where
saying,
would you park it?
Exactly. I'd have to park it like on the coast and then,
That's right.
Walk to it.
I have a car. It's
Yeah, it's a garage in the centre of London costs more than the place I'm living in now. So there's no way I was going to ever own a car there. And you find ways. And the thing is, though, with that is that whenever then I did have a need to drive, it would be because I was moving home. And that would mean you'd have to hire a big white van and drive it through central London traffic. When you haven't driven any vehicle for, say, a year or two, and you've got no rear view mirror because obviously there's a van, and you just be there kind of like petrified thinking, I'm going to crash this and I'm going to die. But yeah, I'm one of the few people who will admit that, yes, I'm a bad driver.
Oh, so you're going to drive now you're here?
I mean, my wife's got a car,
right.
and
she drives everywhere.
And she drives everywhere, and she sometimes lets me drive, But we both know that I'm not a very good driver, and also I'm kind of like, yeah, you can drive. I kind of like being here and playing with the radio and just like playing with the aircon, going, oh, it's too hot, too cold, too hot, too cold. That I'm good at.
What an annoying passenger.
Even Google Maps has taken over my navigation job. I got nothing.
The story behind this particular piece is the Sunshine Coast man. You might recall this. He made headlines 3 years ago when he demolished his Jeep Cherokee in frustration. He's become a consumer advocate. This is the guy who couldn't get satisfaction. I think he had something like 22 faults in 4 years.
Oh, yes.
He could not get satisfaction out of this thing, kept taking it back and went, that's it. So they just totally trashed the car, destroyed it, and invited everyone else to come and help them destroy it as a public display and an advertisement to say, your car's rubbish, your service is rubbish, you're not helping me. Well, he's now become an advocate for all these other people who've had all these other problems, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
But
Such a great story.
It is. It's become a bit of a
So
champion,
fantastic,
isn't
it?
Yeah.
But just imagine the sheer joy of throwing the match on that car that's caused you so much angst.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That just must have been, whoa.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think we should all be allowed to do that. Maybe even with, no, that would be taking it too far to put the salesman with it.
I'd love it if you had to make it an event. Make it an event where you can just smash things up, kind of like...
Invite your friends.
Yeah, exactly. Desks, cars, things like this. I imagine it'd be very therapeutic in some sort of way.
Yeah.
I think it would be. This is ABC Radio Brisbane in Queensland. You're listening to Eat the Week, and our second main course is regarding the new opposition leader in New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who had been in the job less than 24 hours before she was asked about balancing her career and potential motherhood.
Hey, I've got a question, and we've been discussing today whether I'm allowed to ask it or not. So, look,
I said,
I'll be
the judge of that.
Let me put it this way. A lot of women in New Zealand feel like they have to make a choice between having babies and having a career or continuing their career at a certain point in their lives, late 30s.
Yep.
So is that a choice that you feel
Thank
that you
you
have
for
to...
reminding the New Zealand public of my age.
Is that a decision that you feel you have to make or that you maybe feel you've already made today?
And I have no problem with you asking me that question, Jesse, because I've been really open about that dilemma because I think probably lots of women face it.
Can I just say I really loved her comeback. Thank you for reminding the New Zealand people of my age. I just went, bam, starts
nice.
to you.
Yep.
Yeah. Really, it's 2017. Do we have to ask these questions now? Would you find that offensive?
Yes, I do. I think depends on the context.
Because she said she wasn't offended. That's why I'm asking this question.
And
she said it was okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe
and so she's saying it's something that she's put out there and discussed. So, maybe in that point, from that aspect. But I think in the right context, I think women do want to know that. So it is interesting to ask that question, but it has to be the right context, and it can't be in a context where you would not ask a man that.
Well, you would never ask a man that.
No, 24 hours in a job.
That's right. She handled herself beautifully.
Yes.
In the same breath, though, I had a little attack of devil's advocate while I was brushing my teeth, and I was thinking, okay, God forbid something terrible happens to New Zealand, and
Where's this going?
Well, you know, I don't. They have a terrible disaster, or that crazy person in North Korea aims something at them, or whatever. When is a good time for a Prime Minister to go, oh, look, I'm taking maternity leave now? And that's a really hard one, because I do believe that a woman can be anything that, you know, the best person for a job is sometimes a woman, the best person for the job is sometimes a man.
Sure.
But, gee, that one
No,
flummoxed me then.
I don't
didn't know what
agree
to
with
do
that.
No?
Well, a male prime minister could be sick.
Yeah, anyone can. Anything can
Because
happen
there's a
anywhere in the
plan
world.
for that, and women CEOs of huge
it's called the
corporations
Deputy
have a
Prime
baby.
Minister, yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, I was thinking of taking a decent chunk of time because you want to enjoy your child then.
Well, that's the dilemma that
Well, we all want
parents
to do that,
face,
but particularly as a politician, you know that the sacrifice you're going to make, and that you're not going to get extended leave off to have a child if you really, you know, if you're the leader of the party or the Prime Minister in this case, you know.
That's a reality for a lot of people. Larissa
yeah.
Waters breastfed her baby while she was voting in Parliament.
Yeah.
Bless her cotton socks.
I still can't believe there was outrage over that. That's extraordinary. I've been really impressed by Jacinda Ardern too, because she's admitted that it's the least wanted job in New Zealand. Even though John Key is probably the most popular Prime Minister in my memory, has retired and been replaced by Bill English. The National Party that they represent is massively up in the polls. They're only 8 weeks out from the election. And here she is. She's just been handed the opposition
chalice.
leadership. Yeah, and yet she's handled it really well. Credit to her.
She did.
Be interesting to
And,
see.
you know, she is a young woman. And I
Well,
think
38, unfortunately, the biological clock's ticking as well. So it's
you
like...
can freeze your eggs.
Jeez. Oh, gosh. Well, if 38's old, I must be practically dead. But
No, that's not old. But if you're thinking about having a child, it's...
yeah, but I think she showed a great deal of grace under fire.
Yes.
You know, I would love to think back to when I was 38, and if somebody had asked me a question like that, Lord knows I wasn't the head of any political party anywhere on the planet when I was that age, but I would love to think that I would be very cool, calm, collected, and say, oh, well, you know, I'll pass it off as thanks for reminding the New Zealand people of my age.
She handled it well, and I
She
think enough
did.
people were outraged on her behalf that she didn't have to
that's
do
right.
that.
She
Yeah,
didn't
that's
have to
right.
do
Yeah,
anything.
and perhaps she's got a lot of skills in terms of leadership in politics. She could have a very long career. Who knows? Maybe
And I'm
she'll
sure
win the unwinnable election. Who knows?
And I'm sure it has been a conversation that she's, you know, so it's something she's commented on before, because women do ask that question.
Yep.
And men. I mean, this day and age, everybody's, you know, people work together and raise families together and share the job load and the load with children. So we're all struggling with that question, really.
I just wish we had the Scandinavian, separate. So you got the maternity leave, paternity leave, which is actually shared between the two partners, or or of any gender, sex, or anything like that. But so it's split rather than it just being, the 1 or 2 weeks, whatever it is for males, and then the whatever it is for females. Then that obligation of that, so it can actually be shared and decided amongst the couple.
Nice. I like that too.
It's very nice.
All right, this is Eat the Week on ABC Radio Brisbane in Queensland. It's 8:45. Our last main this evening, well, there's this little social problem.
You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, and know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done.
Ah, yeah, smiles all around here. What is it about that song? People just love that song, don't they? Why?
I have no idea. My reason, I'll take my reason. I taught around Warwick for a long time.
Yeah,
And we had the Rose and Rodeo Festival.
yeah.
And in the park in front of my block of flats, we had the country music. And honestly, I developed a taste for it. I loved it.
Yeah, and every second act was doing their own version of the game.
They were. Yep. You know, when we had the talent nights and everybody brought their guitar along,
Yeah.
everybody had a crack at that one.
There you go. I don't know what it is, but people don't even like country music seem to love that song for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. Someone should do a study on that. This story is about a study where it was revealed this week that problem gambling affects almost 200,000 Australians. Gambling is widespread, particularly among older men. Men are more likely to gamble than women, and the incidence of gambling in a typical month increases with age. Fess up, do you gamble? You
no,
gamblers?
Terrible at it.
Yeah.
I might have been a gambler if I'd ever won anything.
Yeah, that's it.
People, and I know heaps of people that say, oh, we went and played the pokies and played for a few hours and won enough to cover dinner and came home. No, I put the money in, it just disappears. Nothing gone in. Straight away.
I'm the sort of person who will actually look online for a voucher for anything. I want to get the best possible deal. I want to get the best price for everything. I'm like, and I feel I got that victory because I'm like, I got that 10% off. I don't want to waste money on something where it's the opposite of that, where I'm putting the money into it, where it's a 10% chance I'll get it back at all. That mindset
Doesn't
to me is
compute
just,
for you.
I cannot understand it.
Yeah.
I was born on Melbourne Cup Day. And I always have a little bet on Melbourne Cup Day. Never lost.
Wow.
Never lost money on Melbourne Cup Day.
Oh, okay. Never lost money. I picked the winner once. I'm not a gambler, really,
I'm not either.
but there's something about Melbourne Cup, and I usually end up
Melbourne
at least getting something in a sweep. But I've only picked the winner once.
No, look, I
that
don't
wasn't
know
in
what
a
it
sweep.
is.
Actually picked the winner, so I'm a terrible gambler.
And when 1,000 years ago, when the pilots were on strike and everywhere was struggling down the Gold Coast, Jupiter's Casino had this sweet deal on for a weekend away. So my husband and I went to Jupiter's Casino and they gave us each 2 $5 chips.
Yes.
Now, I didn't know how to play any of the games, so while Brian was in the shower, I sat on the end of the bed and watched John Farnham, who did the in-house television thing. And I only had time to really...
Celebrity guest croupier?
Celebrity guest, teach yourself how to play this game. And the only one I was able to work out was 21.
Right.
So I went...
blackjack, as it's called in the casino.
That's right.
Yes.
So we had dinner, we had lovely dinner, and then Brian said, do you want to go and... Yeah, let's see how long it takes us to lose our 2 $5 chips. So I sat down at the $5 table.
That was a big...
Oh, yeah. Shrewd, very shrewd. An hour and a half later, my husband tapped me on the shoulder and said, have you lost the money yet? No, I haven't. I've just been pushing it into my handbag because it looked rude sitting in front of me. And he said, well, how about we call it quits? So I took my handbag over to the cash out lady and we'd paid for our weekend.
Wow.
There you go. But but then when you say things like that, that's the thing that kind of like spurs on the mentality that goes, that could be me.
No, but you see, I also watched at that table an old gentleman, and that article said that elderly gentlemen are more likely to get caught.
Yes.
And he simply put his hand back to his wife and said, give me the housekeeping.
Oh, no.
And I just hated that. I hated
That's
that.
so sad.
It was.
In the psychology of conditioning, Pavlov's dog, all of that sort of stuff, training people, partial reward is the most powerful conditioner. So when you sometimes get the payoff, that's the lure.
That
is it. That's the biggie.
It's like dating as well, isn't it? It's like if if someone's too keen, then you just feel like, oh, I don't know, it's a bit much, isn't it? But if someone's a bit like, yeah, okay, we could meet up, you'll be like, yeah.
So if someone's all over you like a rash, like a bad rash, then you just back right off, But if you just show a little bit of interest,
the next thing you know, you're like, yeah, cash in.
See, Charlie, got it wrong, mate. So how do we resolve the issue of gambling in this country? It's topical this week too, because we've just seen that the Premier said no to the proposed development on the Spit on the Gold Coast. You mentioned Jupiter's on the Gold Coast, Sue-Belinda. So, 200,000 or nearly 200,000 Australians are identified as being problem gamblers. How do we get around that? What do we do?
The one that really tickled me was the demographic of the 25 to 34-year-old men. I mean, it's how many weeks ago now that poor old Smashed Avocado was copping a hiding for the reason they can't buy houses. And yet they're spending $120 a month on gambling. That just shook me to my socks.
How many, though? What percentage?
I know. I bet. Where's the ratio in that? Is that kind of 120 across everyone?
We'll just check with the statistician here. We're getting the paperwork out now.
Yeah,
it's getting serious.
It said the 25 to 34-year-old demographic, the average man was spending $120 a month on gambling, Well, some of them must be spending a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I bet that's a very skewed figure, I'm guessing, in terms of like some people who are having so much more. But if you're looking at this problem, you're looking at the problem of addiction in general, right?
Yes,
you're looking
that's
at
true.
fundamentally any sort of addiction. How do you solve that?
Yes.
And that's something which you've got to question. It's like, well, okay, how much money is gambling paying for in terms of like taxes, in terms of funds and things like that? And then you have to question, is that really going to change? Is someone actually going to say, well, we're going to lose all of that money, but basically, take
What government is going to
That's
say
right.
no to the revenue stream to stop the problem? Yeah.
And can I also mention that if you look back over the history of the state of origin, New South Wales couldn't beat us until they started getting money from the pokies to buy really expensive players.
No, incorrect. Poker machines have been in New South Wales a long, long time.
Yeah,
long
but
before
when,
Queensland.
when they started having them in the clubs and were buying, that's when they started doing well. And that's when we
New
started.
South Wales
they
have
were
never
around
done
for a
well.
long
No,
way.
no.
No, you have a
Poker
look.
machines have been
Nah,
around
that's
for a
not
long, long
right.
time in New South Wales.
And
Yes,
also,
okay.
that Hilda survey estimates the problem gambling affects 1.5% of women and 0.8% of women and 1.5% of men.
Yeah, but that's just as gamblers. You know,
Problem
think
gambling.
how many women are affected as a knock-on of
Oh, that's true.
partner gambling and losing the mortgage payment, the
Oh,
electricity.
it's a huge, it's bad. Do you ever watch that? Have you ABC program? It's on ABC iView called "You Can't Ask That." Has anybody
Yes.
else
I haven't
hooked on
watched
that
it. I know of it, yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
My favourite one was Centenarians. Make sure you watch that. It was just fantastic. But there's one on gambling that's up on iView at the moment, and it's a real insight. It's terrible for people that are affected.
Yeah.
Families and people, who suffer with that addiction.
Well, having watched that program, what do you think the answer is, Kathy?
I don't know. I don't know.
Wise one. I'm just going to pass the baton to you.
They talked about the access to credit and the fact that one guy racked up something like $1 million in debt because he was just able to get more and more credit, not from a casino but from credit companies.
All sorts of
And
sources.
I remember when they moved the ATMs further away because that was supposed to be when you've got to do that walk, that's enough time to move away from the sound and to start thinking about what am I doing?
Yeah.
So all of those little things.
That's right. There would be a lot of study on that sort of things, like plain packaging in cigarettes and, advertising. There was a time where we didn't think that could happen at all.
No.
And look at it now.
Yeah, and the thing is, then you're kind of into the point of like saying, well, okay, we're going to push things to prohibition, and then you've got the whole thing
That
of like
didn't
you're
work.
ignoring the
work.
problem fundamentally and pretending
Yes.
it's not there also has another effect. So
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
things like actually looking at credit and something like that was going to be far more effective than just saying no more gambling.
Yeah, which I think is in part also the reasoning of governments in getting involved as well, because it was illegal, wasn't it? And then there were lots of bookies.
Yeah, you can't beat them. We'll
right.
regulate it, and then we'll make sure that we do quite nicely out of it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. So with a few minutes left to go on the show, just as a dessert for Eat the Week this week, is there any particular topic, any particular story that's grabbed your attention, anything that's really rubbing you up the wrong way? No?
I don't know. Things that well, do you know if
Yes.
maybe if I could use this as if I could have my heart's desire, I'm one of those people who lets people in traffic.
Oh, that's nice.
That's a Queensland thing, though, isn't it? Don't you think?
I think it is, but in the same breath, I mean, I'm letting them in. I'm making the choice to do that. Would this hurt in the rear vision mirror?
She's waving.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
I'm
thank you.
waving.
Yeah, if you're watching on Facebook Live, you've seen Sue-Belinda waving.
People do that.
Yes,
I'm
thank
a
you.
waver too.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
now that we've got buttons, I hit the button and stick the whole paw
Oh,
out the window.
The whole hand goes out.
Give them
You're
a
very
big
committed.
Oh,
Give
if-
them a big cheery wave.
If I'm following a truck up a hill and he pulls over, I always say
Yep.
thank you very
Yeah.
much for letting me go past. And
I
yeah,
had this
always.
actually did have this conversation with somebody this week who is here from another city and driving, and they said, "Gee, people here are really courteous."
Oh, that's nice.
That's true, they are. I find Queensland drivers are very courteous. And in Melbourne, you're not even a driver.
I've never
You
had
don't
a
get
car,
to
but I'm a
play.
driver. And I always find it's kind of like, I'm sitting there in the car and I see people changing lanes. I'm thinking, what are they doing? Why is this guy tailgating me so much?
Yes.
I actually find it took me a while to get used to it. I thought everyone was really aggressive here. And then I was kind of like, oh no, that's just how driving is here.
Yeah.
Everyone will just change lanes and say,
I think
you deal
that's
with
a
it.
particular Queensland thing, the tailgating thing. But I was just going to say, how would you know about courtesy when you're the one who's playing with the air conditioning and annoying your partner?
I'm very observant,
I'd make you sit in your own zone.
And I'm the one doing the waving, so,
If you drive in Melbourne or Sydney, I know Melbourne, I can't really speak for Sydney, but I know in Melbourne you have to be very decisive. So people won't, that whole thing of letting somebody in, that doesn't happen. They're on a mission.
Yeah, bang.
Yeah, and
Go
so
now.
you be decisive. Yeah. You go
Yeah.
across, they'll let you in, but they're not going to wait about for you.
You snooze, you lose.
think about
Yeah.
And you get that situation where you got the line of traffic and there's one lane where you know it's about to end and someone goes down there and they start indicating in. I'm always thinking, they could be in a rush, They could have I don't know their life. I don't know what they're doing.
No, that's like
I can't.
practice. They can see that the road's closed up there, and they rocket up that lane.
But what if
See, that's
the
not
wife's
polite.
in labour?
That's not polite at all.
What if they're that they've got an emergency situation going on? I
Oh,
always try
they
to.
don't.
Could I just mention?
But sometimes I do get in those spots and then I haven't realised and I think, I bet they're all thinking I did this on purpose.
This is me speaking as the foreigner who's been since moving to Brisbane. The times I have been driving and I'm kind of like, I'm in the wrong lane, and just like seeing this row of traffic going like, you dare merge into this lane. You keep driving. You go on to that grass bank.
Just to let you know, if you ever have a pregnant woman in the car, you just put a hanky in the door jamb, and the hanky flapping around is the signal that you've got a pregnant woman on board.
Really?
You need to get the hospital.
Really?
How many people know that?
Is
Nobody
that
knows
a
that.
universal sign?
Sue-Belinda.
No. I read an article on that some time ago. The cabbies do it, and they were saying, if everyone did it, and
It would be a universal sign.
So the question to that New Zealand that should have been: have you got a hanky ready just in case?
Just in case you
She's
fall
not
pregnant,
gonna
you've got to
know.
get to a hospital.
Exactly. Got to think of all the steps.
how long
here.
are your trips on the road?
Are you a courteous driver, Kathy?
Yes,
Okay.
very courteous driver. Yep. Yes, when I was younger, I was a bit sort of, what's the word? Not a lead foot. I don't want to say that. I was probably I wanted to get there.
Yeah.
But I've
impatient.
learned a bit impatient. Thank you. But I've learned to cool it.
I think as we get older, that's
And I
that's a
must
trait.
say, I like that Queensland thing of, I just like that niceness of, I'll let you in.
Yep.
I don't want to let a whole lane of traffic.
No.
One for one.
One for one.
All right.
And
Okay.
better to be 20 minutes late than 20 years early.
Okay. To all the listeners, there you go. Take that thought away from the program. Ending on a positive note.
Yeah.
Sue-Belinda Meehan, Steve Morgan, and Kathy McLeish, thank you so much for being a part of the program on Eat the Week, and look forward to having you again real soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, lovely people. It was good fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Was indeed. Latest ABC News coming up in just seconds, and then